Welcome, esteemed viewers. In today's video, Tropical Crime Files brings you a case that sent shockwaves through the entire community. It is the horrifying story of a man hailed as a devout follower, yet possessed a sick, ruthless heart, a man whose heinous crimes would break the heart of God himself. The incident took place within the jurisdiction of Long Tam Parish in Baria City, Baria, Vung Tau Province, or Tam Long Ward, Ho Chi Minh City. The perpetrator, Pham Van Dung, was a highly respected figure among the parishioners, holding multiple prominent religious titles within the church. However, that very facade of piety and virtue served as the perfect cover. It allowed Dung to conceal his sinister atrocities for a prolonged period, ruthlessly targeting innocent, vulnerable children. To protect the privacy and lives of the victims and their families, Tropical Crime Files has changed the names of the individuals involved. Thank you for tuning in. On the evening of April 17, 2021, 5-year-old Ngoc Thu was playing with her friends near her house, in an area now integrated into Tam Long Ward, Ho Chi Minh City. By 9:30 p.m., noticing she hadn't returned home to sleep, her anxious family launched a frantic search. At 11 p.m., their worst nightmare became a reality. Thu's breathless body was discovered in a vacant lot just 300 meters from her home, missing her pants and foaming at the mouth. She was rushed to the local general hospital, but the innocent child was pronounced dead on arrival. The vacant lot where Thu was found spanned roughly 17,000 square meters, surrounded by a maze of 6 to 8 narrow alleys and overgrown with dry, patchy brush. At night, the entire area was plunged into pitch darkness, completely devoid of streetlights. Deep inside the lot, near alley 122 Vothi Sao Street, investigators marked the primary crime scene next to a large pile of sand scattered with debris, bricks, and broken glass. There, on the western edge of the sand pile, sat a small pair of worn red rubber shoes. This neighborhood, part of the former Long Tam Parish near the local church, a devout, peaceful Catholic community, had just been stained by an unspeakable evil. At the hospital, the emergency room staff confirmed that Thu had passed away before arrival, bearing clear signs of sexual assault. That night, the head ER nurse broke down in tears while examining the poor child's body. As the news spread, a wave of profound sorrow and fiery public outrage gripped the entire community. Mourners traveled from far and wide to attend Ngoc Thu's funeral, united in their grief and demand for justice. The Criminal Investigation Agency immediately launched an investigation and ordered a forensic examination to determine the exact cause of death. Forensic autopsy report. Number 186 soon stripped away any remaining doubt. Pham Ngoc Thu's cause of death was mechanical asphyxiation due to strangulation. Horrifyingly, the report also documented acute bleeding trauma to the victim's private area, the brutal marks of a predator's assault before her young life was cruelly extinguished. Recognizing the depravity and gravity of this heinous assault, the Criminal Investigation Department immediately deployed maximum force to the scene, launching a race against time. At the victim's home, the atmosphere was thick with grief. Thu's mother was entirely inconsolable, drifting in and out of consciousness. Through the tearful words of the maternal grandmother, Thu was remembered as a bright, beautiful, and vibrant little girl. Following her parents' divorce, she lived with her mother, grandmother, and older sister in an alleyway house in what is now Tam Long Ward, Ho Chi Minh City. Tragically, the investigation would later unearth an even darker truth. Thu's older sister had also fallen prey to the exact same predator, though under a different criminal charge. To maximize efficiency, a midnight briefing was called to profile and narrow down the suspects. Investigators divided their targets into 3 distinct groups. First, individuals with ties to the victim's family living near the scene. Second, local convicted felons, particularly those with a history of homicide or child sexual abuse. And third, opportunistic transients present in the area that night. Every tactical unit was assigned a specific grid, with strict orders to report back before dawn on who could be cleared and who required further surveillance. Based on intelligence and neighborhood interviews, detectives quickly flagged 6 local felons. The prime suspect was a man named T, who had recently been paroled after serving time for the rape of a minor under 16 and was currently unemployed. Suspicion heightened when detectives noticed white stains on T's pants resembling seminal fluid. Forensic and crime scene tech units were rushed in for an emergency analysis. However, the tests came back negative. Furthermore, a review of security footage from T's own house provided an airtight alibi, confirming he was home during the exact window of the murder. T was cleared. The focus on known felons had led the investigation into a dead end, costing precious hours. Detectives made a pivotal decision to pivot, shifting their focus toward individuals with no prior criminal records. They caught a crucial break. On the night of the murder, a large memorial feast with over 100 guests was held at a house just 300 meters from the crime scene. Detectives immediately launched a massive dragnet, going door to door to screen every single attendee, including recent arrivals and temporary residents. The suspect pool instantly swelled to several hundred people. The desolate lot where the body was found lacked any streetlights or surveillance. Undeterred, investigators expanded their digital canvas, painstakingly gathering footage from neighboring properties. Their last hope lay in the security cameras of 3 nearby residents: Mr. Nguyen Phuc An, Mr. Phu Van Ban, and Miss Nguyen Thi Tao. The grueling process of hunting for a ghost in the midnight shadows had officially begun. The breakthrough in the case came from a neighbor's security footage. In the blurry night vision of April 17, 2021, young Ngoc Thu was seen playing outside. The last captured image of the girl was at approximately 8:30 p.m. A mysterious dark silhouette emerged from a dimly lit alley, and the clueless child ran after it. Seconds later, both vanished from the frame. Investigators immediately suspected this shadow was the killer. However, the footage was heavily pixelated. The critical breakthrough came when forensic technicians noticed a split-second glint on the screen, the unmistakable reflection of light hitting a pair of eyeglasses. This pivotal clue provided a profile. The suspect was an older male, wore glasses, and was likely someone the victim knew and trusted. When the image was shown to locals, suspicion fell heavily on a man living right next to the scene, known locally as Dung Jia. He was among the 100 guests at the memorial feast that night. Dung's real name was Pham Van Dung, born in 1975 and known as a devout Catholic. He lived with his family in an area now integrated into Tam Long Ward, Chi Minh City. To the parish and his neighbors, Dung maintained a terrifyingly flawless facade. He served as the church's choir deputy and youth leader, a quiet, respected man dedicated to the community. He was the kind neighborhood uncle who handed out treats to the local children. Even after committing the crime, Dung and his wife calmly visited the grieving family to help arrange Thu's funeral, masquerading as a benevolent neighbor without showing a single shred of guilt. However, as detectives dug deeper into Dung's private life, a monstrous reality unraveled. Behind his pious mask lay a predator with deeply deviant sexual impulses. A close source revealed a dark family secret. Back in 2000, while his wife was pregnant, Dung had forced himself upon his teenage sister-in-law, ultimately fathering a child with her. For years, the family had suffered in silence to avoid public shame. Chillingly, the night of the murder coincided exactly with that illegitimate child's birthday. Upon interrogation, Dung remained defiantly tight-lipped, confident in his alibi. He had been seen by hundreds of people at both the feast and his father-in-law's house. He believed the cover of darkness had hidden his sins perfectly. But investigators delivered a psychological death blow when they confronted him with a fatal 29-minute gap in his timeline. Dung claimed he left the feast at 8:19 p.m. to go home, which was only 15 meters away. Finding himself locked out, he walked to his father-in-law's house nearby. While that walk should have taken a mere 6 minutes, it took Dung 35 minutes to arrive. A police reenactment exposed the truth. That unaccounted 29-minute window was the exact amount of time required to abduct, murder, and assault a child. Crushed by the airtight logic, Dung broke down and confessed. The next morning, on April 19, 2021, a crime scene reenactment was staged, where Dung coldly demonstrated his actions. He confessed that after leaving the feast, he crossed paths with Ngoc Thu. Recognizing her familiar Uncle Dung, the little girl followed him without hesitation. His predatory instincts took over. Dung carried her into the pitch-black vacant lot. When they reached the isolated sand piles, Dung began to fondle her, causing the terrified child to scream. Panicked, Dung ruthlessly strangled the 5-year-old girl for 5 agonizing minutes until her cries stopped and her body went limp. Even after realizing the innocent child was dead, the monster proceeded to sexually assault her lifeless body to satisfy his twisted urges before abandoning her in the cold sand. By 8:55 p.m., Dung arrived at his father-in-law's birthday gathering as if nothing had happened. Later that night, while washing up at home, he noticed blood on his left middle finger. Knowing it was the blood of his young victim, he casually washed it away, went to bed, and closed the chapter on a night of unspeakable horror. To solidify the indictment against Pham Van Dung, investigators cross-referenced the surrounding security footage. The digital timeline perfectly aligned with Dung's movements, the time of the murder, and his ultimate confession. Furthermore, detectives requested an urgent DNA analysis from the Forensic Science Sub-Institute in Ho Chi Minh City. Initially, swabbings from the victim's private area and Dung's fingernails showed no detectable semen or male DNA profiles. Yet, justice would not be denied. In a stunning forensic breakthrough, technicians extracted a hidden profile. Mixed DNA belonging directly to the defendant, Pham Van Dung, was discovered trapped under the fingernails of little Ngoc Thu. The silent cry of the victim had trapped her killer. A chilling dynamic of this investigation was the behavior of Dung's wife. When detectives initially brought the couple in for questioning, she subtly calculated her statements to shield her husband. Living with Dung for decades, she harbored dark suspicions about his nature but chose self-preservation over the truth. It was only when investigators slammed Dung's written confession onto the table that her facade shattered. She finally admitted that on the night of the murder, she witnessed Dung frantically washing his hands in a state of sheer panic. She recalled his visible, overwhelming terror when attending the child's funeral. This blind complicity was ultimately codified as supporting evidence in the final police report. Knowing a predator of this depravity rarely strikes just once, the police launched an inquiry into Dung's past. By mobilizing local residents within the Tam Long Ward community, Ho Chi Minh City, a sickening pattern of serial abuse came to light. Utilizing the large front yard of his home and his hidden beansprout workshop as hunting grounds, Dung had systematically groomed and assaulted several innocent neighborhood girls between 2020 and 2021. Under intense interrogation, Dung confessed to 3 additional horrifying assaults. In March 2020, while intoxicated and alone, Dung lured 8-year-old Luong Beach Chi into his dark workshop, gave her 50,000 Vietnamese dong, and forcefully kissed and fondled her for 5 minutes. Chi was a vulnerable child, abandoned by her biological parents. In April 2020, Dung targeted 7-year-old Pham Ngoc Thu, the older sister of his future murder victim, Ngoc Thu. He dragged her into his kitchen, forcibly kissed her cheeks, and threatened her to maintain his vile secret. In January 2021, 10-year-old Nguyen Vu Trinh was sent by her father to fetch bean sprouts from Dung's house. The monster struck again, handing her 20,000 Vietnamese dong before forcefully kissing the young girl on the lips. While subsequent forensic examinations fortunately revealed no permanent physical trauma or lacerations to the 3 young survivors, the psychological scars inflicted upon them were absolute. The Criminal Investigation Agency officially concluded its dossier. Pham Van Dung was indicted on 3 counts of maximum severity: murder, rape of a minor under 16, and sexual molestation of a minor under 16 under Articles 123, 142, and 146 of the Penal Code. Regarding his illicit affair with his teenage sister-in-law dating back to 2000, authorities determined that she was over 16 at the time and the encounters were consensual, meaning it did not meet the thresholds for further criminal prosecution. The wolf in sheep's clothing had finally been unmasked, bringing a somber justice to the soul of little Ngoc Thu. Following the conclusion of the police investigation and the official indictment by the prosecution, the People's Court handed down its final judgment. For his monstrous and predatory actions, Pham Van Dung was sentenced to death for murder, 20 years in prison for the rape of a minor under 16, and 3 years for sexual molestation. In total, the combined sentence for Dung Jia was the absolute penalty: execution by death. From the chilling confines of his prison cell, the killer still attempted to cling to cowardly justifications. He claimed that throughout his life he had never broken the law, always posing as a model citizen and a devout follower of God. Dung redirected the blame to a car accident back in 2004, suggesting the trauma had somehow altered his brain. Since then, whenever alcohol enters my system, my mind is consumed by criminal impulses, Dung whimpered. It was the alcohol that stripped away my humanity. Dung admitted that during his initial days in detention, the looming shadow of the death penalty plunged him into a severe psychological crisis. Today, he claims to be filled with deep remorse and repentance, torturing himself with questions he cannot answer. Yet, despite committing an abomination that would break the heart of God himself, this predator still holds a desperate, hollow hope to be granted a second chance at life. Following Dung's arrest and conviction, his wife and children quietly vanished, fleeing to a distant locality to escape the lingering shame. His wife completely abandoned the lucrative bean sprout business, despite it being their primary source of substantial wealth. By now, the heavy realization had likely set in for his wife and her family. They bore a silent share of the blame for this earth-shattering tragedy. They were the ones who chose silence, harboring and enabling evil while violating human morality. If they had spoken out against Dung's depravity with his teenage sister-in-law nearly 2 decades ago, a serial predator might never have been born, and an innocent 5-year-old angel would still be alive today. Tropical Crime Files sincerely thanks you for watching this video until the very end. Your continuous support drives us to keep uncovering the truths behind these profound cases. Thank you, and we will see you in our next files.